Okay. Hi, this is Rick Watson. We're here at Shop Talk 2025 in Vegas again. Why do we keep doing this to ourselves? I'm here with Bryan, the president of Elastic Path, and we're going to talk a little bit about a research paper report that they commissioned, but also some about the Elastic Path business itself. So welcome, Bryan.
Hey, Rick, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for being on here. So I guess let's start at the beginning. You've been in commerce for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Elastic Path? Why does Elastic Path exist?
Sure. So, I've been in commerce for many years. Always been a startup guy, and Elastic Path is a composable commerce company, and our job is really about helping organizations, typically manufacturers, wholesalers, and branded retailers, who have unique commerce requirements and who want to assemble or compose a best-of-breed commerce application stack to meet their business requirements. Typically, organizations that we work with either have uniquely high scale requirements and are doing either product drops, things like iPhones or collectibles, and are selling thousands of products per second, or they have unique and complex product catalog needs. So a good customer example of ours is Serena and Lily. They have something close to like 1,500 options for a piece of furniture that you can customize. Wow. And so part of what their digital experience is about is recreating the in-store designer experience. When you go to a designer, they have all the options available to you. When you go online, with most commerce platforms, you don't have that ability to replicate that in-store experience. And so that's one of the things that we do exceptionally well, which is why we're a really good platform for manufacturers with complex product lines. And like that.
It's interesting. I mean, one of the challenges I think that a lot of companies have is that forget about like the bells and whistles of commerce. They can't represent their business accurately in some of these platforms out there. And it seems like this is kind of the direction that you're leaning into.
Yeah, that's spot on. We really believe that, one of the, an opportunity that exists in the commerce market is to sort of recreate the in-store magic, if you will, right? And some of that is you walk into a retail establishment and it's the way the store is laid out and the decorations, but that even translates into a B2B scenario. Typically, one of our customers is Pella Windows, right? And, you need someone to walk you through the sort of, infinite number of combinatorial options you have to design a window for your house. There are opportunities to recreate that online without having to do that, without requiring a salesperson, right? And so, and a lot of the manual processes that organizations have as their buyers are looking to do more digital purchasing and more digital experience-driven activities.
No, that makes sense. There's been a lot of history in Elastic Path. I mean, I've been in commerce for a long time as well, and I've historically remembered Elastic Path as kind of this developer-first platform. And I think there's been some evolution. And so, how should people think about Elastic Path today and where you came from?
Sure. So Elastic Path, maybe about 5 years ago, actually acquired a multi-tenant SaaS platform. That's become Elastic Path Commerce Cloud. And really what we saw is the market was shifting away from sort of on-prem software and some of the dynamics there with upgrades and what have you. And so we're looking for SaaS solutions and really the emergence of composable and the ability to assemble lots of best of breed. And so, I think many of the vendors in the market were faced, we see it with Adobe, just based on their recent announcement this week. You could either refactor your old existing platform and sort of inherit all the complexity and complications that 20 years of development in that platform, or you could go and start anew. And really what Elastic Path chose to do was to acquire a company and really start anew with a multi-tenant SaaS. Now, we have certainly established bridges between the two. And so our self-managed customers that manage on-prem can take advantage of SaaS solutions, right? Because one of the truisms that we know and have realized is every digital commerce application is a multi-vendor application. It's composable because that's
by default.
By default, like because there's no single vendor does all the things necessary for digital commerce.
Right.
So if you're going to take advantage of a third-party solution in our self-managed base, why not take advantage of one of our cloud solutions as opposed to a third-party solution? So we've enabled you to have the right foundational component that makes sense for your business, as well as take advantage of cloud services to align with what your requirements are and sort of what your business outcomes you're seeking to achieve.
And I guess the solution, what generally is your pricing based on if I'm a customer looking to learn more?
Sure. Our pricing is very much in line with the rest of the commerce industry. It's a percent of GMV or based on number of orders, depending on what your order price is. So very similar to every other platform and how they price in the market. I think we have a great value story in terms of both comparatively to other platforms, as well as we've focused a ton of energy on integration and facilitating integration. So, because that really is one of the biggest drivers on the implementation side, it's integrating into back-end systems. So we built in a native iPaaS. So I think our total cost of ownership is unique and much lower than comparable offerings. But from a pricing model, it's pretty straightforward.
That makes sense. And I know one of the things that we uncovered when we talked to Astrak on the podcast was a big part of it was integrating to that source of truth.
Exactly.
And then bringing it to life in the customer experience. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Exactly, right. Given that a lot of our customers are complex product lines, they have ERPs that they integrate directly to, or sort of industrial level PIMs. And so, that information, you can't just put a front end on it and call it commerce, right? You need a sort of intermediary layer to enrich your content and to create much more engaging experiences that lead to transactions and conversions. And so we do that exceptionally well, and we think that's really where our sweet spot in the market is.
So you said intermediary, and I just want to make sure I understand what you mean by that. Is it the APIs themselves, or is there I'll call it a digital PIM in between these systems of record and the front end that people create experiences with?
So we have a product called Product Experience Manager, which serves as a web commerce PIM. And so you can use it holistically as a PIM if you have relatively straightforward product lines. Most people integrate it back into their ERP. So it becomes their ERP or their PIM is their source of truth. And then that integrates into our PXM. And then from there, you can do further enrichment, organization of your products. And really what our secret sauce is we've broken PXM into a set of discrete services. One's products, one's price books, and then third's organization of the catalog. So now that gives you this tremendous flexibility in terms of how you represent your catalog. So in a B2C scenario, you can have one set of products with pricing for your general customers, pricing for your VIP customers, pricing for different regions. And all with one set of products. You don't have 5 sets of your products. You're duplicating and managing that constantly across your stores. In a B2B scenario, you can have contract negotiated pricing, and then you have a price book for each one of your customers, right? So it makes it much, much easier to manage the intersection of products and pricing without like undue duplication of resources, which then keeping everything in sync becomes a huge overhead.
Yeah, no, I get it, and I can see why that would be valuable to folks. You recently commissioned, kind of transitioning the topics a little bit, what you're calling Digital Commerce Market Survey. I guess, what is it, and kind of what was the inspiration behind doing that?
Sure. So, we're, as an organization, I believe very strongly in putting our customers really at the center of everything we do. And so one of the ways I did that very shortly after I joined Elastic Path was I was brought in to run product and product management. And I took over the customer success organization and I actually put it in the product management organization, which seems strange in some ways. But what it did is it forced our product managers out on the front line, so we were much closer to customers to really understand what the problems they're facing were, rather than guessing at the problems.
Right.
And it provided a tremendous amount of value to our customer success folks, because they were perceived as delivering value to the customers. Because once a customer buys a SaaS software product, they only want to talk to product managers. What's on the roadmap? How do I influence a roadmap? These are the 5 things that are broken. When are you going to fix them? Right. And so once you do that, you, as a customer success person, you really develop a relationship based on trust. Because, hey, we talked about this thing with our product manager. We brought you in as a design partner for our new promotions engine. Now let's drive adoption of that. And are you getting the value we talked about? What changes do we need to make? And so that's great at a certain scale in terms of understanding what customer needs are. But I was really pushing our organization to get a lot smarter about our ideal customer profile. So we have 3 primary markets we operate in, manufacturers, wholesalers, and distributors, and then branded retailers. And I felt like our level of understanding of what their digital commerce challenges was good, but wasn't nearly deep enough to influence roadmap decisions, to think about where do we want to focus our go-to-market efforts, and how do we tell our story. And so we commissioned a survey. It was 200 quantitative survey respondents, and then like a dozen qualitative interviews, long-form interviews in the UK and in North America, to really understand what the business challenges these organizations and digital commerce leaders specifically were facing as they thought about their commerce platforms. And it's been super insightful and delivered exactly the kind of results we were hoping for, right? Because I want to raise our overall organizational IQ when it comes to this, so that way that informs the decisions we make, the prioritizations that we pursue, right? Because everything in software development and life in general is trade-offs, right? I have to have 2 choices and I don't get both of them. Which one am I going to choose?
Right. No, exactly. So it sounded like improving the organization, improving your product, learning more about where your customers are and where they're headed was some goals of the survey. I'm sure there are things you expected coming out of this, but I'm sure the audience would be much more interested in hearing about the surprises.
Sure.
Like, I don't know. Let's just start wherever you want to start with that topic.
Sure. I mean, look, coming from the perspective of an e-commerce platform vendor, one of the things that we've noticed in the market over the last 2 years is there's really, in sort of post-COVID, there's been a dramatic slowdown in software purchasing and commerce, right? People are living within the constraints that they have and with the tools they bought. I think there's a whole sort of CapEx amortization schedule everybody's working through because they bought so much software at the beginning of COVID. And so one of the things that I was really interested in is, why have we seen such a dramatic slowdown? And are there indications of change? Like, is everybody just super happy with their commerce platform? And like everything is groovy and like we'll never buy another one again? Or was there some other factor? And I think the biggest surprise was 93% of respondents said that they were struggling with the limitations their commerce platforms imposed on them doing business every day, right? And so, I'm hopeful that is a leading indicator of potential change and sort of reinvigoration of this market. And then even on building on top of that, we asked specifically what would drive people to consider replatforms, or where did that fit? And across each of the verticals, replatforming was actually on their minds. Like 30 to 45% of organizations in each of the three categories of companies were considering replatforms, right? Because that does not reflect what we
in the market.
Exactly, it does not reflect the indications that the market's given us on a day-to-day basis. It was much higher.
And so it's almost first of all, a lot to unpack.
Sure.
In that statement you made. Last year, I kind of noticed similar things at the beginning of the year. I made a statement on LinkedIn which went bananas. And it was related to the fact that most digital leaders would rather gnaw off their own arm than commit themselves to a replatform project. And it just seems like more people are replatforming because they're forced to due to company constraints, investments, financial, investors, competitors, versus like, I want to improve my business and level up my customer experience.
Yep.
Although it seems like most people would want that to happen. Is that still within the range of what you've found? Even if they were stewing in the background and not doing it?
So, we had the same perception of the market. And I remember the post, we talked about it. And that was a little bit of where my head was at. But what I saw in manufacturing, 55% of people had the top priority digital e-commerce replatforming. In retail, it was 44%. And in wholesale, it was 44%. Those are significantly higher numbers than I thought, right?
Right.
And maybe that's all, they're all on DIY platforms, right? And so, we certainly, over the last couple of years, in this sort of freeze, if you will, have seen that DIY platforms, right? There's still a ton of those out there in the commerce space. We talk to people all the time.
It's like all custom, thing they build in-house.
Exactly.
Or their SI built for them.
Exactly. And they're like, we know how to build a commerce platform. So sure, but is that your core competency, right? Is that the thing that you want to do? And does that drive competitive advantage for your business? And in many cases, it doesn't. And so those were the source of most of the discussions we were seeing over the last couple of years. And I think the survey highlights that there's probably more latent demand for that now. And so hopefully that latent demand becomes explicit demand. But the primary driver for digital commerce platform change was user experience. And it was two things that came out of it. It was user experience and then integrations. And we sort of asked it at a sort of front end sort of shopper facing level and then from a technical level, and unsurprisingly those were the two top answers.
Got it.
So I think people still perceive that they know they have to create better experiences for their customers and have ideas about what those experiences are.
Right.
And then they're dying on integrations.
And so, I mean, it still begs the question of, to the root of it, sort of the why question. And there's this gap between latent, kind of the latent pain that exists.
Yep.
Your stats are pretty compelling, 55%, 45%, 44%, unsatisfied.
Yep.
They're thinking about replatforming, yet they're not they're not pulling the trigger. Or maybe they're thinking about pulling the trigger. Do you think it's a business case point of view? Do you think it's a market timing point of view? Where do people need the most help if indeed the customer experience is going to significantly improve and that's going to drive their business, yet they're not pulling the trigger yet? Is it just other priorities getting in the way?
So I think it really comes down to the conversation between the head of digital commerce, be that in the marketing organization, the IT organization, and the CFO, right? And because I think the CFO is demanding: are you going to deliver greater returns? Are we going to see different, faster growth in our e-commerce sales by making a platform change? And I think the market in general, classic sort of Jeffrey Moore innovators, in the innovation curve is everybody's sort of late majority now. And so nobody wants to commit to well, we're going to grow our e-commerce 10% if we make this platform change, right? That feels like a career limiting move. However, when we said what would be the primary instigator for platform change, for manufacturing, 41% would be high traffic that's not converting. In retail, it was 40%. In wholesale, it was 41% again, right? So failure of their current experiences and platforms to deliver the results they want is the primary driver.
Right.
And then the second one typically came out to be technical issues, which I don't think is compelling enough necessarily unless you've had sort of a lights out sort of, the thing where it was out for a week, right? Which it happens occasionally. And then third was CSAT. It was NPS, right? And I don't think either the technical or the customer satisfaction are probably enough to move the needle to convince the CFO we got to take action. But I do think the conversion rate and some perception of we're failing to convert at the rate we should is a pretty compelling event. I was surprised to see that was actually
Yeah.
the number one driver.
That's fascinating. I mean, the interesting thing is the cause of that conversion rate difference. Is that a cause, an aspirational cause, or is that an effect of the market on the companies that are moving? For instance, like one of the things I've seen in my consulting clients is that people are very motivated to move when a competitor does something.
Yes.
Right?
Totally.
Right? And so 2 years in, they're like, uh-oh, we're in trouble. We're starting to lose business. And so when I look at a conversion rate kind of number, initially my head goes to like, oh, the business wants to grow.
Yeah.
Which is usually like, to me, I've seen like that's not enough either.
Yeah. I agree.
It's like you want to grow, sure, that's like a baseline. And then you might have tech issues and whatever, but then fear. The fear of being locked out of your customer base, customers voting with their feet.
Yeah.
And so where the UX raises in priority in the C-suite, I don't know if you would agree with the statement that it's really like customers voting with their feet then makes technology the driver.
Yeah. I think technology is a potential remedy or solution to this. We're having declining sales. There are patterns of behavior that we're seeing in our digital commerce operations that are suggesting that we're failing at somewhere along the way to convert them into paying customers.
Yeah.
But I think I think this is one of the things we've seen in the market that may be a hard sell, right? Right. Because then, in effect, you are signing up for solving that problem, which may be a technical problem, it may be a design problem, it may be a third, some other problem.
Right. Yeah, and at the same time, and look, if you have an external forcing function, then you can use that as an opportunity. My experience is also that a lot of these, particularly like manufacturers, distributors, they don't have the same language that the sophisticated direct-to-consumer or digital leaders have.
Yeah.
I find the language usually to be much simpler, like, we just want to be easier to do business with. And it's almost like sometimes their technology is like unfrozen caveman, green screens they call up a customer, they send in a fax, they're told to submit a PDF to support, it goes into their, someone keys it into their ERP system. Like, you're trying to change all that.
Yeah, and I think one of the we sort of have sort of the generational changes on our side, right? I think the expectations of people in these businesses, as younger people come in and join and take over positions of power, purchasing power, and relationship power and accounts, certainly are making decisions based on that experience, particularly in B2B scenarios. So that I think is very easily measured in dollars and cents on an organization's balance sheet, right? Like, every organization has competitors, and like, wait a minute, our competitors are growing, we're falling behind, but we still require you to send in a fax with your order every day, right?
Those things might be related.
Exactly. What do you mean? You can send a fax on your phone, right?
Right.
That's your mobile app.
It's not good for you. So we unpacked a lot of surprises related to UX. They're thinking about replatforming. They're not pulling the trigger. What are some of the other surprises that you uncovered?
I'm not sure that I would describe this maybe as a surprise, because it sort of aligns with things we're seeing in the market. But the growing importance of loyalty so 32% of organizations said their limitations are eroding customer trust and loyalty. And that's such an important point and dynamic at this point in time, because the arbitrage opportunities for customer acquisition with sort of social media ads have evaporated. It's a lot more expensive to acquire customers now, which means you now need to grow share of wallet for the customers you have. It's much more inexpensive. And so we're starting to see more and more of that as a driver in this. The other thing that that we saw was a
Yeah,
lot
just
more.
to that point,
Yep.
and I'm actually running a panel here at Shop Talk in a couple of days with the head of loyalty and SVP of marketing at Lowe's Home Improvement, as well as DSW, and we're going to be unpacking like a lot of that stuff. Like, how do you drive a brand, especially if you need to reimagine a loyalty program that might be a little bit long in the tooth?
Totally.
Like, what should you be thinking about? What questions should you be asking yourself?
Totally. You know, and it's funny. It's funny you mentioned Lowe's because I just saw a commercial about My Lowe's on
Right.
TV
Yeah.
during a basketball game last weekend, and it sort of caught my mind because I was, we moved to my house 20 years ago. I had kids, and we were in Lowe's all the time because
Right.
their primary market's new homeowners because you're doing home improvement projects. And for years, I was in the loyalty program and got zero benefit.
Right.
Never got a coupon. Never got any reward whatsoever. And I remember like being like, why do I keep typing in my number? Like,
Right.
who cares? And now that's become like a huge priority for them. And so they, now they're buying TV ads on national networks. So
Yeah.
I think it's a, I think one of the challenges of loyalty now becomes, loyalty used to mean two things: discount codes and free stuff. And both of those are margin eroding, right? And so in a world where we will trade, growth at all costs for profitable growth, and that applies in tech companies as well as in merchants and retailers, how do you take advantage of loyalty to build deeper relationships that aren't simply about, free coupons,
Right.
And reducing your costs? And so I think there's a tremendous amount of energy there. And I know we've invested a ton into subscriptions and entitlements to facilitate this. In fact, we saw, and this was another surprise, the wholesaler and distributor market was like 55% of respondents were super interested in subscriptions. And you wouldn't think of that as a subscription business per se, but what they're, I think we're seeing more and more of this in B2B is people make regular purchases.
Right.
How do I just sort of lock that in?
Yeah, replenishable parts, replenishable orders,
exactly,
those sorts of
consumables.
things. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. And these folks, look, there are a lot of people who are, there are not a lot of people that are replatforming, but a lot of people are working on their experience.
Yes.
And so one of the things we were talking about before we started recording was the difference between kind of the replatformers and the optimizers.
Yeah.
And how do you serve these optimizers that want to add things to their experience but don't want to go through like a 2-year root canal?
Totally. Totally. Well, and so one decision that we made at Elastic Path when I ran products maybe 2 years ago was effectively, given we had a microservice architecture, we could offer services as independent products. So you didn't need to buy the whole enchilada in order to start taking advantage of it. And so we called this unplatforming. And we've had some success, some people that buy just cart and checkout, some people that buy just catalog, depending on what their problem is. And so part of what the focus was to narrow the scope of the problem. So that way you made it easier to onboard, and then our bet is we have exceptional customer service and customer success. And that's a core value principle of ours. So therefore, we could earn the right to compete for more of your business.
Right.
I think that still exists, and we've even talked to people here at the show about small ways to get started. And so that I think is the interim solution to this problem. I think the long-term solution that I'm really bullish about is frankly AI. I don't know if you've seen. Bolt or Lovable. Now you can go clone a website, and in 5 minutes you got a working version of a website with a whole GitHub repo that's up on a hosting version, right? Like, if I think about the long poles in a commerce implementation, it's front-end experience design, it's integrations, and it's data cleansing and data migration between your systems.
Yeah.
All three of those are eminently solvable with AI, and as AI gets better, it's going to be a huge thing. So actually one of the tasks that I've given our team, we had a strategic offsite last week, was we need to get a replatform down from 6 months to 6 weeks, right? And using AI tools and rethinking the whole process, right? Because, so much of this market is, driven by systems integrators and billable resources, and, and they play an important role in the adoption and selection of technologies. but that's a situation that's ripe for disruption with technology.
I think this is a fascinating exercise because I don't think there are a lot of people out there saying that. And the system integrators are kind of like, they're helpful. They have a lot of experience and wisdom and knowledge based on their experience, but their experience is also only as good as the tools that are evolving around them.
Sure.
And so 6 months to 6 weeks, is that achievable?
I definitely think it's achievable, and we are actively and aggressively experimenting with some of these solutions. Like, so an example of this is we built a Next.js front end to use as a starter kit, a reference architecture, open source, it's available in our GitHub repo. I'm like, I'd love to now do all of our projects where we put that into Lovable or some solution like that and build you a Next.js front end on the our composable front end foundation, but completely tied to your brand, using your products, right? There's no reason I can't do that today. And that way, I can ensure that you get production level code, but I don't have to hand do my CSS for the next 9 weeks, right? Like, is that really value add in 2025? No, and it's by 2030, that's going to be obsolete. No one's going to do that.
Do you think historically, and I know you follow this as well as I have, there are two ways to build the front end of a website. It was based on a template and a theme, or something a little bit more custom.
Yep.
Do you think those distinctions kind of start to blend and go away?
It's a good question. I hadn't thought of it like that. My gut tells me yes, right? So, because think about it, like every one of us who's in tech can go into view source code and see how a front end is built, right? So can the AI, right? So there's no reason that they can't, those are easily recognized patterns, right? There's reasons we created templates and starter kits and reference architectures. It was to take out cost, time, out of the equation.
It's also easy for humans to understand.
Totally, right? I was reading, there's this guy I read, his name's Ben Stencil on Substack, and he wrote a great post about this where, levels of abstraction are about making it easier for developers, but then, you inherit a code base that over time that has so much abstraction and no one understands what it does, right? And AI coding tends to be exceptionally verbose, and that was always bad in the old days because it had too many lines of code, but it was all explicit, right? And so, it was a really good thought piece on which one really is the best way to do it. Like, there's pros and cons of both. There's trade-offs and everything.
Well, if you kind of go back to the history of programming as a recovering software engineer myself, all the crud, things to access a database, you used to code that by hand.
Exactly.
And at some point, you could hydrate that from a SQL schema.
Yep.
And it was all generated code, and you didn't care how long it was or how. I mean, obviously you cared about the efficiency, but the efficiency wasn't tied to that function.
Yeah, exactly.
It was tied to the throughput of the system and what the user was trying to do. And I think there could be an analog here that, look, if you could talk to an AI and generate a front end that's flexible, you don't necessarily care as much about how it's implemented. And so a lot of these technology platforms that aren't as flexible could suffer from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things that we've seen in our tests is we made a big effort over a year ago to make sure all of our APIs conform to the open API spec. And in doing that, it's paying off tons of dividends with regards to using AI to write code with our software, because the AI really understands and can use that as a way to translate and understand those the APIs really, really well. And so I think where the challenge is legacy platforms that don't have nearly as well-formed APIs, that don't conform to industry standards like the open API spec, are really going to suffer, and it's going to be very difficult to do integrations in an automated fashion with AI. I think we will still have that challenge when there's some third-party system behind the firewall that's delivering data, be it ERP data or order data or whatever. We don't magically solve that, but we simplify the process so that we're sort of buff out all of the friction along the way.
Yeah, And so these APIs, I mean, they're like the building blocks
Totally.
that the AI needs to kind of program that solution.
Yeah. I mean, in the AI does a remarkable job at leveraging those building blocks and making inferences that are intelligent, that are based on well-formed patterns, to write code based on that, right? And so I think it gives us a leg up in terms of our ability to adopt this really well and deliver solutions that add demonstrable business value for customers.
I mean, I think it's interesting. And so ultimately, this is going to remove the value of expertise in this sort of the system integration layer and kind of move the conversation to the user a little bit. And we've talked about this in the past, and I'm interested to see if you found anything in the report you commissioned related to envisioning the art of the possible. And are users sophisticated enough? Like, there's a skill, like as a product manager, you know, Steve Jobs didn't invent things that people told him to build. He invented things that he thought people needed and didn't know they asked for. Are the retailers and distributors that like, who's playing that role within these companies and imagining the art of the possible that makes sense?
Well, honestly, I think it's a huge gap. And one of the questions we asked was around AI adoption and where it is on your roadmap, and what are the things that stand out that you want to do. And so while 86% of organizations said AI integration of their online store is critical, although they say they feel like they'll be left behind, the number one use case was SEO and web content, which is not super interesting, right? And chatbots are interesting, and depending on how you use them. And I think there's a ton of shopper assistants that have the potential to be really disruptive and add value and change the whole paradigm with how we interact with commerce websites, because most of our interactions are due through the search bar, which is terrible. Because I have to proactively tell it what I'm looking for and which filters I want to choose in order to narrow down 1,000 results to 20 that I can navigate through. Right, like AI can do all that for me, but I think the macro point is the survey didn't identify the innovators, right? So we go back to the innovator side. And so frankly, we've talked a lot about systems integrators. That's probably the role that they play, right? Is the consultants can come up and help deliver big ideas because the achievability of those isn't the problem. The problem is the creativity of it.
I think that's a fascinating point, because I think a lot of system integrators are trying to figure out, like,
exactly,
if coding becomes a commodity,
totally,
then the developer isn't the unit of work that I'm selling anymore. I need to be selling creative solutions, which might mean restaffing all these system integrators too.
Well, but look, I think one of the things that we've seen, certainly in the history of Elastic Path and in the market in general, is the willingness to pay for expertise at scale has diminished dramatically. Right now, every SI has offshore resources, right? Low-cost resources. So like the natural evolution of first they're in North America or in Europe, then they went to Eastern Europe or just nearshore, then they went to offshore, now they went to super low-cost regions. Right now they're going to automate away, right? Like it's a natural extension of where that's been going for a long time, and certainly customers aren't willing to pay for that. So I think that it makes sense that that's where that goes, and I think there's the opportunity now becomes what are new ways to create value.
Yeah, I think that strategy needs to be essential before you undertake the solution. You get down to the point where been putting it off, it's affecting your business. Do you, from a future point of view in the market, are you seeing signs that more people are adopting, or do you think it's just going to be this way for a while and it's going to take some pushing for these organizations to really upgrade their experiences?
If you asked me that a year, 2 years ago, I think they were just waiting. Everyone's sitting on the sideline. But I do believe, now that we sort of a number of years out from COVID. The amortization schedules have worked their way through. I think we will see brands really starting to reinvest, and focus on that. And, kudos to some of the other players in the market like Shopify, where, what they're doing is convincing everyone that you don't need 75% of those complex requirements,
right,
that you can simplify and reduce your costs, right? But and they'll make it up in payments.
Right.
I think that's great for a certain number of brands, but there's a lot of brands that aren't going to fit into, or manufacturers and wholesalers aren't going to fit into that model. But they know, I think it's becoming clear, and we're starting to see early indications that now is the time to invest, to leap ahead of our competition, and to create some unique advantage that we can exploit for a number of years.
Got it. Any final words? We're kind of wrapping up here. Any final words for our listeners regarding the report, how they can find it? What should they take away as they think about their journey?
Sure. So, you can find it on elasticpath.com. It's our 2025 Digital Commerce Landscape Report. And we have a landing page for that. I think the takeaways for us was certainly prioritizing smart integrations, and getting better at integrating and really evaluating the tools we have. One of the things that we encounter all the time is, integrations is by definition a development task. The developer's like, I know how to do that, right? But do you really know? Are you in the business of running a long series of lambdas, right, and serverless functions that you have to keep up and running? Do you know how to? Do you have a process in place to prioritize how to identify problems when something happens? There's solutions to that.
Right.
Embrace the solutions.
Yeah.
Certainly empowering merchandisers with the better tools. One of the big takeaways from this was, across all three categories of customers, dealing with manual pricing changes and sort of the effort associated with managing pricing and dynamic pricing is still incredibly inefficient. And so, right, but that's the thing a merchandiser does day in and day out. That should be easy. We've solved that problem with our PXM and separating the price book service. 73% of teams believe that their organization's growth is limited by their ability to accurately showcase their product catalog and to take advantage of some of the capabilities there. And then certainly AI is, overwhelmingly super interesting to every organization.
Right.
And I think for the opportunity is, can you free AI? You use AI as a way to free budget to start to experiment, right? Because we're in an experimentation phase. And a little bit of where we're focused on is, how do we help shoppers better engage with your brands? How do we help your merchandisers be more efficient with some of these inefficiencies? And then thirdly, how do we, like I said, go from 6 months to 6 weeks on an implementation, right? So you can spin new things up immediately and see run experiments more effectively. Everybody A/B tests on the page.
Right.
Why not A/B test store pages or things like a larger scale that have potential for more impact in your organization?
Right. Well, I think impact is what we're all about here. So I think that's probably a good place to stop the interview. Bryan, it's been such a pleasure to unpack the digital commerce market survey and letting people know how they can find it. We're at Shop Talk in Las Vegas. I hope we're going to be able to escape unscathed back to our normal lives, away from sort of the bubble that we're at. So I really appreciate you spending some time talking to our listeners.
Awesome, Rick. It was really great. Always a pleasure. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thanks so much.
Excellent.
Hi, I'm Rick Watson, CEO and founder of RMW Commerce Consulting and host of the Watson Weekly podcast, your essential e-commerce digest. Our production partner for the series is Podcast on the Fly. This podcast is produced by RMW Commerce. To hear new episodes of the show every Monday morning, subscribe now at rmwcommerce.com/Watson Weekly and wherever you get your podcasts.